Father, guide us now in Jesus' name, and we thank you. A day in the life of Christ. Call it a tapestry of turmoil, if you want, a noisy pictorial in which the golden threads of triumph entwine with the black frazzled strings of tragedy. Call it a symphony of emotions, a sunrise to sunset orchestration of extremes. One score is brassy with exuberance, the next moans with sorrow. On one page, the orchestra swells in adoration. On the next, Jesus solos the ballad of loneliness. Whatever you call it real. Call it a day in which Jesus experiences more stress than he will any other day of his life, aside from his crucifixion. Before the morning becomes evening, he has reason to weep. Before the morning becomes evening, he has reason to run. He has reason to shout. He has reason to curse, to praise, and to doubt. From calm to chaos, from peace to perplexity, within moments, his world is turned upside down. In the tapestry through life, Jesus is having a rough time this day. In the tapestry, though, there is one thread that sparkles. In the symphony, there is one song that soars. In the story, there is one lesson that comforts. You've heard it before, but you may have forgotten it. Look closely, listen intently, be reminded. Jesus knows how you feel. If you've ever had a day in which you've been blitzed by demands, if you've ever ridden the roller coaster of sorrow and celebration, if you've ever wondered if God in heaven can relate to you on earth, then please reread about this pressure-packed day in the life of Jesus Christ. Take heart. Jesus knows how you feel. He begins the morning by hearing about the death of John the Baptist, his cousin, his forerunner, his co-worker, his friend. The man who came closer to understanding Jesus than any other is dead. Imagine losing the one person who knows you better than anyone else, and you will feel what Jesus is feeling. Reflect on the horror of being told that your dearest friend has just been murdered, and you will relate to Jesus' sorrow. Consider your reaction if you were told that your best friend had just been decapitated by a people-pleasing, incestuous monarch, and you'll see how the day begins for Christ. His world is beginning to turn upside down. Jesus knows how you feel. The emissaries brought more than news of sorrow. However, they brought a warning. The same Herod who took John's head is interested in yours. Listen to how Luke presents the monarch's madness. Herod said, I beheaded John. Who then is this I hear such things about? And he tried to see him. Something tells me that Herod wanted more than a social visit with Jesus. So, with John's life taken and his own life threatened, Jesus chooses to get away for a while. When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to the solitary place, or to a solitary place. But before he can get away, his disciples arrive. The Gospel of Mark states that the apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. They returned exuberant. Jesus had commissioned them to proclaim the gospel and authenticate it with miracles. They went out and preached that people should repent. They drove out many demons and anointed many sick people with oil and healed them. Can you imagine the excitement? Can you envision the scene? A reunion of 12 friends, a reuniting of disciples with their teacher, a homecoming bubbling with testimonies. Peter describing the lame man he healed, John telling of a crowd he taught, Andrew recounting the deliverance of an epileptic boy, James relating to Jesus how the crowds followed him wherever he went, Matthew reporting the healing of a blind woman. Remember, these disciples were ordinary men. They weren't orators, they weren't scholars, they weren't kings, they weren't saints. They were fishermen and a tax collector, common laborers who by God's power had taken a nation by storm. Listen, the emotion, exuberance. In a matter of moments, Jesus' heart goes from the pace of a funeral dirge to the triumphant march of a ticker-tape parade. Listen, and look who follows the disciples to locate Jesus. About 5,000 men plus women and children. Rivers of people cascade out of the hills and out of the villages. Some scholars estimate the crowd to be as high as 25,000. They swarm around Jesus, each with one desire: to meet the man who had empowered the disciples. See? What had been a calm morning now buzzes with activity. So many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat. I've had people demand my attention now. I know what it's really like. I know what it's like to have a half dozen kids wanting different things at the same time. I know the feeling of receiving one call with two other people waiting impatiently on other lines. Listen, I even know what it's like to be encircled by a dozen or so people, each making a separate request. But 25,000, that's larger than many cities. No wonder the disciples couldn't eat. No wonder they couldn't eat. I'm surprised they could even breathe. The morning has been a jungle trail of the unexpected. First, Jesus grieves over the death of his cousin. Then his life is threatened. Next, he celebrates the triumphant return of his followers. Then he is nearly suffocated by a group of humanity. Listen, bereavement, jeopardy, jubilation, bedlam. Are you beginning to see why I call this the second most stressful day in the life of Christ? And it's far from over. Listen, Jesus decides to take the disciples to a quiet place where they can rest and reflect and where he can pray. He shouts a command over the noise of the crowd: come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. The 13 fight their way to the beach and climb into a boat. Can you see it? And for a few precious moments, the world is quiet again. The din of the crowd grows distant, and the only sound is the slap of the water against the hull of the boat. Jesus' heart is weighted by sorrow and buoyed by joy. He watches his followers swapping stories of victory. Then he raises his glance and sees on the horizon Tiberias, the city constructed by John the Baptist's murderer, Herod. Joy suddenly alloyed with indignation causes his fist to clench and his eyes to moisten. I just imagine. Who would question his desire to get away from the people? He just needs a few hours alone, just a respite, just a retreat, time to pray, time to ponder, time to weep, a time without crowds or demands, a campfire wreathed with friends, an evening with those he loves. The people can wait until tomorrow. Listen, the people, however, have other ideas. The crowds learn about it and follow him. It's about a 6 or 7 mile walk around the northeastern corner of the Sea of Galilee, so the crowd takes a hike. When Jesus got to Bethsaida, his desired retreat had become a roaring arena. Surprise! Add to the list of sorrow, peril, excitement, and bedlam, and the word interruption. Jesus' plans are interrupted. What he has in mind for his day and what the people have in mind for his day are two different agendas. What Jesus seeks and what Jesus gets, in other words, are not the same. Sound familiar? Jesus knows how you feel. Remember when you sought a night's rest and got a colicky baby? Remember when you sought to catch up at the office and got even further behind? Remember when you sought to use your Saturday for leisure but ended up fixing your neighbor's sink? Take comfort, friend. It happened to Jesus too. In fact, this would be a good time to pause and digest the central message. Jesus knows how you feel. See, ponder this and use it the next time your world goes from calm to chaos. His pulse has raced also. His eyes have grown weary. His heart has grown heavy. He has had to climb out of bed with a sore throat before. He has been kept awake late and has gotten up early. Jesus knows how you feel. You may have trouble believing that. You probably believe that Jesus knows what it means to endure heavy-duty tragedies. You are no doubt convinced that Jesus is acquainted with sorrow and has wrestled with fear. Most people accept that, but can God relate to the hassles and headaches of my life, of your life? Jesus knows how you feel, see? Can God relate to the hassles and headaches of my life? That's the question. For some reason, this is harder to believe. Perhaps that's why portions of this day are recorded in all the gospel accounts. No other event other than the crucifixion is told by all four gospel writers. Not Jesus' baptism, not his temptation, not even his birth. But all four writers chronicle this day. It's as if Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John knew that you would wonder if God understands. And they proclaim their response in four-part harmony. Listen. Jesus knows how you feel. A friend of mine was recently trying to teach his 6-year-old son how to shoot a basket in a basketball court. The boy would take the basketball and push it as hard as he could toward the goal, but it always fell short. My friend, his father, would then take the ball and toss it toward the basket, saying something like, "Just do it like this, son, it's easy." Then the boy would try and miss again. My friend would then take the ball and make another basket, encouraging his son to push the ball a bit harder. After several minutes and many misses, the boy responded to his father's encouragement by saying, "Yeah, but it's easy for you, 'cause you're up there. You don't know how hard it is from down here. You and I can never say that about God. Of the many messages Jesus taught us that day about stress, the first one is this: God knows how you feel. Let me read to you how J.B. Phillips translates Hebrews 4:15. For we have no superhuman high priest to whom our weaknesses are unintelligible. He himself has shared fully in all our experience of temptation, except that he never sinned. The writer of Hebrews is adamant almost to the point of redundancy. It's as if he anticipates our objections. It's as if he knows that we will say to God what my friend's son said to him. God, it's easy for you up there. You don't know how hard it is from down here. So he boldly proclaims Jesus' ability to understand. Listen, look at the wording again. He himself, not an angel, not an ambassador, not an emissary, but Jesus himself shared fully, not partially, not nearly, not to a large degree, entirely. He shared fully. Jesus shared fully. In all our experience, every hurt, every ache, all the stresses and all the strains, no exceptions, no substitutes. Why? Listen, why? So he could sympathize with our weaknesses. A politician dons a hard hat and enters the factory like he is one of the employees. A social worker goes to the inner city and spends the night on the streets with the homeless. A general walks into the mess hall and sits down with the soldiers like he is one of the enlisted men. All three want to communicate the same message. I identify with you. I can understand. I can relate. There's one problem, though. The factory employees know that the politician's hard hat will come off when the television crew is gone. The derelicts know that the social worker will be in a warm bed tomorrow night. And the soldiers are well aware that for every meal the general eats in the mess hall, he'll eat dozens in the officers' quarters. Try as they might, these well-meaning professionals don't really understand. Their participation is partial. Jesus' participation, however, was complete. The writer of Hebrews states with double clarity that Jesus shared fully in all our experience. A bookstore owner in the Northwest once told me about an angry lady who stomped in carrying a book written by Max Lucado called God Came Near. She slammed the book on the counter and said in a few less than kind things about the book, and then screamed loudly enough for everybody on the block to hear, "My God didn't have pimples." I know the paragraph. I've read the book. It reads like this: Jesus may have had pimples. He may have been tone deaf. Perhaps a girl down the street had a crush on him and vice versa. It could be that his knees were bony. One thing's for sure, he was, while completely divine, completely human. Now, I can understand why the woman became upset. I can relate to her discomfort. We quickly fix a crack in the stained glass. We rub away any smudges off the altar. There is something safe about a God who never has calluses. There is something awesome about a God who never felt pain. There is something majestic about a God who never scraped his elbow. But there's also something cold about a God who cannot relate to what you and I feel. If I had a moment with that lady, I would ask her, Jesus may not have had pimples, but don't you hope that he could have? Every page of the Gospels hammers home this crucial principle. God knows how you feel. From the funeral to the factory to the frustration of a demanding schedule, Jesus understands. See, when you tell God that you've reached your limit, he knows what you mean. When you shake your head at impossible deadlines, he shakes his too. When your plans are interrupted by people who have other plans, he nods in empathy. He has been there. See, he knows how you feel. Jesus knows how you feel. Before we resume our chronicling of this stressful day in Jesus' life, let me take you to another day, one far more recent, in a place closer to home. February 15, 1921, New York City, the operating room of the Kane Summit Hospital. A doctor is performing an appendectomy. In many ways, the events leading to the surgery are uneventful. The patient has complained of severe abdominal pain. The diagnosis is clear: an inflamed appendix. Dr. Evan O'Neill Kane is performing the surgery. In his distinguished 37-year medical career, he has performed nearly 4,000 appendectomies. So this surgery will be uneventful, actually, in all ways except two. The first novelty of this operation, the use of local anesthesia, is in a major surgery is unheard of. Dr. Kane is a crusader against the hazards of general anesthesia. He contends that a local application is far safer. Many of his colleagues agree with him in principle, but in order for them to agree in practice, they will have to see the theory applied. Dr. Kane searches for a volunteer, a patient who is willing to undergo surgery while under local anesthesia. A volunteer is not easily found. Many are squeamish at the thought of being awake during their own surgery. Others are fearful that the anesthesia might wear off too soon. Eventually, however, Dr. Kane finds a candidate. On Tuesday morning, February 15th, the historic operation occurs. The patient is prepped and wheeled into the operating room. A local anesthetic is applied. As he has done thousands of times, Dr. Kane dissects the superficial tissues and locates the appendix. He skillfully exercises it and concludes the surgery. During the procedure, the patient complains of only minor discomfort. The volunteer is taken into a post-op where he is then placed in the hospital ward. He recovers quickly and is dismissed 2 days later. Dr. Kane had proven his theory thanks to the willingness of a brave volunteer. Kane demonstrated that local anesthesia was a viable and even preferable alternative. But I said there were two facts that made the surgery unique. I've told you the first, the use of local anesthesia. The second is the patient. The courageous candidate for surgery by Dr. Kane was, in fact, Dr. Kane. To prove his point, Dr. Kane operated on himself. A wise move. The doctor became a patient in order to convince the patients to trust the doctor. I've shared this story with several health professionals. They each gave me the same response: the furrowed brow, suspicious grin, and the dubious words, "That's hard to believe." Perhaps it is, but the story of the doctor who became his own patient is mild compared to the story of the God who became human. But Jesus did, so that you and I would believe that the healer knows our hearts. The healer knows our hurts. He voluntarily became one of us. He placed himself in our position. He suffered our pains and felt our fears. Rejection, he felt it. Temptation, he knew it. Loneliness, he experienced it. Death, he tasted it. And stress, listen, and stress, he could write a best-selling book about stress. Why did he do it? One reason, so that when you hurt, you will go to him, your Father and your physician, and let him heal you. Jesus knows how you feel, see?